An eyewitness video showed projectiles being fired in the air of Caracas city's skyline last night. This in the wake of the US military intervention in Venezuela and capture of ousted President Nicolas Maduro. The Vice Minister of Communications, Simon Arrechider, who confirmed to journalists in a message that what happened in downtown Caracas was due to drones flying over without permission, with police firing shots as a deterrent. US forces swooped into Caracas before dawn on Saturday in a deadly raid that yielded the capture of Maduro. He has been turned over to federal authorities by the US military for prosecution on charges involving alleged drug trafficking. Maduro, 63, pleaded not guilty in New York federal court to 4 criminal counts. All right, now joining us for more on the capture of Maduro and his court appearance yesterday is Sanusha Naidu. She's Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Sanusha, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So just a cursory look across the media today. The space is littered with visuals of a shackled Maduro in his first appearance and also commentary around what many term the defiant spirit when he insisted he's a president of Venezuela and an innocent man. Your views on all that is unfolding?
To the viewers, I think it's really something that has become part of the visual that this has happened in the way that it's happened, the kind of action that was taken, the question of whether there was legality to the operation itself, the issues that were debated in the UN Security Council in terms of what does this mean for the global governance architecture, the rules-based international system, where are we now? I mean, it's just kind of, it seems almost surreal. It seems as if we are sitting in a movie house watching this unfold. And the challenge right now, Mufundo, is that it really brings into question whether or not the international architecture is now at the point of not just an inflection point, but at that point of no return. Because it seems as if what has transpired in terms of the capturing of the Venezuelan president and the way in which this was carried out, whether or not we are now sitting at a very invidious point regarding these global institutions, their value proposition, and the relevance in the kind of underwriting of the rules-based system. Because we just saw one of the major actors, or a major actor in the international system, using its power to completely the detriment of the rules-based system. And I think that is what is really more concerning for me in terms of whether or not these institutions are able now to deal with the impact, the consequences, and whether they can still talk about a rules-based system.
Sanusha, we're still all referring to this intervention or what we saw take place as a capture. But I'm sure yesterday you would have heard from international reporters that there was a reframing of what had happened and referring to Maduro as a fugitive of justice when he has insisted that he's a president of Venezuela. But all of that has led to many now drawing similarities between this capture and the Panama invasion, but also bringing back the debate around US interventionism, given the destruction left perhaps in Libya, Iraq, Vietnam, you name it. But then there are, of course, those who are proponents of this interventionism and feel there are positive outcomes in defeating perhaps the likes of Nazi Germany and Japan. Where exactly do you fall on just this debate around interventionism?
It doesn't work out. It's not always about whether you achieve the end result. The means does not, the means does not justify the ends, so to speak. And I think the challenge we have is or those that claim that this was about a ruler or a president of a country that was considered to be illegitimate within his own country, and then, of course, they were acting in the interests of those. Again, the question does remain, what happens to people in Venezuela? How does this impact on them? Because this is not just about whether or not this was a president that you didn't like or people that are living in the diaspora have objections to his rule. The question of the president's legitimacy or illegitimacy. The bigger question here, Mfuto, is what happens to the economic architecture of this country? We've seen this in other countries as well. We've seen this in Afghanistan. We've seen this in Iraq. We've seen this as well in terms of the impact this is going to have on the economic reserves, the foreign reserves of the country. We already know that part of those foreign reserves are now being held or will be frozen. And this doesn't actually have any kind of democratic impact on the people on the ground in Venezuela. The consequences of what this has on ordinary people's lives and livelihoods, they are now sitting in a very, very disturbing political situation where they don't know how this is going to play out. And this is what has happened. So this idea that you're doing it because you are trying to bring democracy, I think now we've completely lost the value proposition of what democracy is. And the challenge we're going to have right now is this question about whether the freezing of the assets, the issue around the access to the natural gas, this is all interconnected. It's not just about democracy and whether this is about a legitimate and illegitimate issue. This is about a rules-based system where now we are completely in a state of invidiousness and completely not able to control. And secondly, it's going to be the cost of living that's going to bear the brunt on ordinary Venezuelans.
But on that score of legitimacy or illegitimacy, if we had to focus on that, Donald Trump for the longest time has, like many other leaders, felt that that was an illegitimate government post the elections in 2024. But then the question arises around why would there be cooperation with Delcy Rodriguez now, who's, I suppose, acting president or president of the country since Nicolas Maduro has been ousted? Why then would the president choose to work with what broadly is an illegitimate government? Because all of those come from the same political party. And now there's going to be some sort of cooperation with them, not perhaps Edmundo Gonzalez, who was, according to many, including Donald Trump before this, considered to be the legitimate winner of that election. Or perhaps work with Maria Corina Machado, who was seen as an activist with legitimacy, who enjoyed support there, but was banned from actually contesting in those elections. But the choice now to work with the second in charge of a so-called illegitimate government from the onset leaves a lot of questions and answers. Where do you stand on just that decision to work with Delcy?
Mfundo, you must remember politics is never a legitimate game. It's always been about how do you create your vested interests and how do you actually use those vested interests for your own kind of political outcome. And this has been the modus operandi of the US in Latin America. It starts off even in the early, in the Cold War with the Nicaraguan arms deal and the question there. You spoke about the Panama invasion and getting into what you call this, the capturing the leader of Panama in about 35 years ago under George Bush Sr. You saw this in Afghanistan. You saw this in Iraq. Was there ever weapons of mass destruction? So the point is that you look at how you leverage and how you use this for transactionalism. And that's the point. It's about the transactionalism of the issues. So if indeed they're willing now to work with this illegitimate regime that they are claiming that was illegitimate, but suddenly now has a level or a modicum of credibility, what is the other interest here? What is the interest that you're willing to overlook?
In closing, I want to take you back to that appearance by Nicolas Maduro in court yesterday, the optics of it all. You had Nicolas there being defiant, as many have said, stating that he's a president of Venezuela, but going on also to speak in Spanish. This is a person who is conversant in English on many occasions, even in his home country, he would have spoken English on several occasions, but there he insisted on speaking Spanish. And beyond that, he was a man who started to speak on his innocence, where a judge had to stop him at some point to say, this is not the time. I mean, when looking at all of that, I couldn't help but be reminded of Fidel Castro when he was captured by the Batista regime, that you had a trial that Fidel then used to his advantage to turn himself into this martyr and use it to humiliate the government of the day. Are we not going to see a situation here where we're going to have Nicolas Maduro actually wanting to speak out and using this opportunity to be turned into a martyr when there probably are legitimate concerns of the people of Venezuela, where perhaps this was an ill-conceived idea to have this man stand trial in 2026?
Well, I think you're right in that sense. You're right to a certain extent that what you are doing is that you're martyrdoming him. in a way, in a sense that the whole operation and the optics of the operation and how the operation was carried out just doesn't fit in the context of what we are looking at in what is a sovereign state. There was a question raised to Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, by one of the American news channels, and asking him what was the legal authority to go in and capture the Venezuelan president, and he couldn't answer that question. And I think that's the challenge. The challenge is that is it about whether you want to capture, whether it was about the national interest and bringing better political conditions to the people of Venezuela. The fact that Maduro is going to speak in Spanish, that's his right. Remember that you do have a large Hispanic community in the US, but you also have Venezuelan exiles that live also in the US. But again, he's probably using this to his optics as well. So it kind of creates this duality, this juxtaposition around whether or not you've achieved what you want to do, whether the intention of the US was to bring him to the New York state, because this is the other very, very disturbing level of the rules-based system, is that you can be charged in a court of law outside your jurisdiction, not in the jurisdiction of the International Court of Law, but rather in the US. And that again makes it very, very difficult to understand where this rules-based system is going. And this in itself means that did you do this to create humiliation for Maduro in front of his own people, or are you now opening up the fact that you have created a Pandora's box that you can't close anymore? So it kind of creates this juxtaposition between the fact that at the end of the day, the world is divided. You may martyr him, not because you like him, but because you are reacting to the US. And on the other hand, people are saying, well, this is a legitimate way to do it, but at the same time, you've delegitimized the rules-based system. So we are in a very, very invidious point in the global architecture. And I think what's happening is the unmasking of an international system that has always created this level of double standards, which we no longer can ignore.
And perhaps now made it more urgent for there to be reforms in the UN Security Council, because if you're going to continue to have the veto power that is not curtailed or not allow for an expansion of membership, then surely that type of a body itself cannot yield the positive results that are needed. Unfortunately, Sanusha, we have run out of time. Absolutely a pleasure speaking to you this afternoon. That's Sanusha Naidu, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, speaking to us there.